Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell, and I want to welcome all of you new listeners that might be joining the show brand new right now, coming to us fresh and new. Here's what the show is all about. This is a show exploring life abroad and life back home, and the bittersweet thing that life is. Something that's full of beauty and choices, but also full of hardships. Tiffany Parks is my co-host. She lives in Rome, Italy, though we met each other on the school bus here in the United States in the 6th grade. And I'm Katy Sewell. I live in Seattle, though I did live abroad for a time, also in Rome, and on the same block as Tiffany. And that's where this show began 10 years ago. Both Tiffany and I are writers. I also have worked for National Public Radio for 20-something years. And Tiffany has lived in Rome for over 20 years and is probably the most gifted tour guide I have ever encountered in all of my travels my entire life. Her knowledge of Rome and Roman history is absolutely astounding. And if you stick with us on this show, you will learn a lot of really interesting tidbits of information along the way. And I will let you know that the old episodes of this show really hold up. So if you're new, don't be afraid to start at the beginning of the show or listen to old episodes besides new episodes simultaneously. Each one of our episodes focuses on a particular topic, and those topics are always changing from week to week. And together, as you listen over these years, if you've been listening for a long time, we explore life and all of its possibilities and how the choices that we make affect us for good and for bad and for everything else in between. And our hope is that you will not only find entertainment here, but you'll find a place where you can contemplate your own life and what you might want to do with it. And you'll also learn about Italy and international culture and language along the way. So welcome. If you're not new, I also want to say welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us during our unfortunate hiatus this month. We will be telling you more about that on next week's episode. And a big thank you to our supporters of the show. You are more vital than ever right now, and you'll also find out why that is next week too. But in the meantime, here we go. On with today's show, marking March 2025. The 5-year marker of the COVID pandemic. Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katy Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Tiffany in Rome, Katy in Seattle, and today we are going to be marking an anniversary of sorts. If you listened to last Friday's episode, you might know what this is about already. But here we are in March 2025, believe it or not, which means that we are at the 5-year anniversary of the COVID lockdown. Hard to believe that began 5 years ago. How does it feel to you?
So hard to believe.
Tiffany? Yeah.
It feels like in many ways it feels like yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that time so well. I mean, I think we all probably do, because it was so different than everything else for everybody on Earth, pretty much. That 2 to 3 month period, and then of course, it dragged on. Depending on where you were living, it dragged on or didn't. You know what I mean? Some places suffered. I don't know if suffered is the right word, but some places had a lockdown that continued. Some places came out of it right away. So it really depends on where you were living. But for those first couple of months, for almost everybody, life was different than it had ever been before, and hopefully ever will be again. I mean, it's kind of funny to think that there's a time in history that was weird for everyone.
Yeah, globally
Universally weird. Like globally, something is going on that's never happened, at least in any of our lifetimes.
Yeah. I wonder if any of if the, you know, how we kind of remember it I sometimes think of it from the perspective of like the creatures outdoors. Because remember back in the early days of Rome, because Rome locks down sooner than we do over here in the US. We started talking about what you were experiencing on this show prior to us having to actually experience it. And that was when we were getting reports of like, what, muskrats, beavers coming into the central Rome because nobody was out walking around. So these creatures all of a sudden had this wider range of motion. And I sometimes think, like, I wonder if they inherently remember it, in some way. Remember that time when all of a sudden it
If
was
they're
so
still alive.
quiet in Rome? Yeah.
Yeah, it was so quiet. There were no cars. That awful sound that we have to deal with, that awful smell in the air that wasn't
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On our Friday shows, our Bittersweet Past shows, where right now we're airing throwback episodes on Friday. And Tiffany had suggested that we air 4 episodes that happened during that period of time for the month of March to mark it. And 2 of those episodes are some of my favorite episodes that were created during that time. And we called it Day in the Life. And it was basically all of you listening. So many of you sent in your dispatches from what was happening in your life at that specific time. And listening through, like putting them together, getting them ready to air on Friday. Oh, so, I mean, some of
Took you
those
back.
sharings, and it's like, and everyone's in different places around the world, and so their experience is like slightly different. And there's that ridiculously incredible piece of tape from Midtown Manhattan that's only birds singing, no cars, no people yelling, just birds. I really enjoyed listening back to it. It was like a because I do think that we remember it, but it also we've almost like tried to let it fade out a little bit, try to get over the trauma of it and re-enter the world. And so some of those things, when I was re-listening, I had forgotten. I don't know. It's almost like a piece of historical history that we managed to capture with all of us together, which was really cool to listen to again.
It is. It's a great episode. I don't know about you, but whenever I see like the date 2020, especially if it's this time of year, either right before like February 2020 or March, April, whatever it might be that I see that date out in the world, I can't help but think about that time and think, oh, this was happening right when that was happening. Oh, this movie came out, or this episode was aired, or that child was born, or whatever had happened would happen on that date. I can't help but think about that. And I have a friend who she now I can't believe that I can't remember the date because when you living through it, it's like, how could I forget this date? But as I'm sitting here, I can't remember if Rome went into lockdown exactly which day. I think it was like announced on March 7th and then we went in on March 8th, or it was announced on March 8th and we went in on March 9th. And somebody write in and tell me, or I'll just Google it. But it was between the 7th and the 9th of March that we heard the announcement, and then it was like, okay, starting tomorrow, the whole country is in zona rossa, as they called it, because that was the thing in Italy. It was like, okay, we have zona rossa. It's like this area around Bergamo and near Milan, and okay, well maybe all of Lombardia, okay, well, maybe all of the north of Italy, and we're all watching like with bated breath to see like what's the zona rossa? Is it going to spread? Is it going to be, is it going to spread to Veneto or what? And all of a sudden it's like the whole country. Boom. And that was the night we got the announcement. And like I said, it was either the 7th or the 8th, and it went into effect on either the 8th or the 9th. My neighbor, who her older son is Aurelio's age, so we spent a lot of time together, especially when our kids were really little. She had her second son on, I want to say March 8th.
Oh,
He was literally born the first day of lockdown.
wow.
I mean, that's just got to be so. I mean, first of all, just to experience it's got to be weird. But I do know that even for months afterwards, no fathers could be allowed in the birthing room, which I think is just so traumatic on the mother, and just on the whole family. I know that that's how they did things until not that long ago, but I mean, I can't even imagine not having had Claudia there. Like, I don't think I could have done it. Like, I think I would have. I don't know. I
You
guess I could have, but I
you
don't
still
feel
would
like I
have.
could have.
Yeah, it wouldn't
I
have been
would
as
have, or
good. Yeah.
well, I probably none of it was good.
Well,
Trust me, it was, um, but it was. he gave me so much strength, so much encouragement. I just, I think I would have given in. I don't know. I just, it wouldn't have been the same. And also just like being there for the birth of your child as a father, I think is so important. To miss that is so sad. But anyways, that's neither here nor there.
Well, I
But
mean, to talk about how recent it was, if I believe I am correct in this, that I was the only child that my father was in the room for, and I'm the last one that was born in the late
wow,
70s. Yeah.
wow.
So it's very
I
recent in
mean,
certain
yeah,
areas.
we need to ask our moms. I mean, I need to ask mine because I don't know. I always assumed my dad was there. I just assumed. I thought it was like the 50s that they weren't there.
Yeah.
Like they're out smoking their cigars, in the lobby. I mean, that's
Yeah.
in the waiting room. That's like what the cartoons make you think. I mean, like for her, that time, I mean, for all of us, I feel like there's pre-COVID and post-COVID. I just feel like life is divided
Hmm.
by for those of us who lived through it. And every time I see the date 2019, I always kind of think to myself, oh, that was before COVID. Like we didn't know what was coming. Like
Hmm.
how strange to go back to that time and like not know how life was going to change, at least temporarily for most of us, although permanently for some people, of course. And I just think she also has this child who was born on, her child is like a living marker of the before and after time. Because also
Hmm.
when you have a child, it's a marker of before and after. There's your life before you had a child, and then your life after, and
Yeah.
it's never the same.
Hmm. I mean, how do you think people have fared? Do you think people are better before, or do you think they're better after? Do you think we've all had a shift in who we are as a result of that experience? I guess,
I
how
don't.
could we not in some ways?
I mean, part of me wants to think we did, but I don't really see it.
Hmm.
I don't see like a shift towards introspectiveness or less consumerism, or I don't see any of that. I think the opposite happened. I think that it seems like people have gone over the top as far as like unintentional living. I don't know. That's just how it seems for me.
I
Go
think
ahead.
that some things have changed, but I think they
Well,
might be.
such as,
Well, I mean, the first one that popped to mind is that, and this isn't, by no means something earth shattering, but I think that there is an inclination now to not go to the movies.
mm,
Rather, like, there's an inclination now to want to stay home and wait till the movie is streaming at home. Why go out and spend all that money when you can watch it from your couch? And that kind of, why would I want to watch a movie with a group of strangers when I could watch it quietly in my own house? And I do think that that is some sort of a cultural shift where it is that I mean, we didn't have access to some of these things prior. Like we had to go somewhere if we wanted to see them. But I think it also is, I don't know, you've gotten intolerant, not used to having to watch something with somebody else anymore.
hmm
I think in Seattle, I can only speak for Seattle, people are definitely going to see plays and ballets and symphonies. And, there's a lot of people. If you go out to a symphony, it's pretty packed, but it's not, at least from what I can see, it's not sold out. And I don't know,
mm.
were they always sold out before? Or is this how it always was? I think that people are going out, but I think that there are certain things that it's harder to drag people out for at this point.
hmm
There's the momentum of the couch.
And also, I don't know about in the States, but I assume it's the same. The rise in takeout,
Mm.
eating at home, eating takeout at home
Hmm.
is seems to be insane.
Yeah, that's true. Where you would rather pick it up and take it home than sit in the restaurant and eat it. Yeah, I think that is true,
Or
actually.
you're getting delivery because there's these delivery companies now.
Hmm.
Every time I go out to eat, no matter where I am, there's always a guy, at least once. I notice him at least one, no, obviously it's not always the same guy, but you know what I mean? I notice that person at least once when I'm either arriving or when I'm leaving, pulling up on his motorcycle or on his bike or on his moped and getting the stuff to deliver. And it's like every single restaurant.
Yeah.
It used to be that you would order pizza. You
Hmm.
called, and I still do. Like we have our pizza places near us,
Yes.
and I call them up and I talk to the people who work there, and the guy who works there delivers the pizzas.
Wow.
And I
That's
love
service.
that. I love that because it's like I know where my money is going, all of
Uh-huh.
it,
Yeah.
and I like that. But it used to be like, yeah, you'd get pizza delivery, or you might get Chinese takeout, you might get sushi, But that's about it. You know, you didn't, it's now it's every single restaurant in the city offers delivery.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to make any
Yeah.
judgments on, what this does for the economy or not, because I don't know enough about that side of it, but it is interesting.
As somebody who's like a tourist in Italy, you wouldn't think of Italy as being a takeout culture.
I don't think it ever used to be.
Yeah, that does seem
And
unusual.
yeah, and I mean, the money that you spend to go out to eat, for me, like part of what I'm paying for is the experience of being A, not in my house,
Mm-hmm.
B, not having to wait on myself. If someone brings me my food, someone takes it away,
Yep.
and just being out, being in a social setting, looking at that, oh my gosh, look how she's dressed. That's such a great outfit, or, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yep.
whatever it is that you notice when you're out and about, or make a connection with someone, even if it's just like, excuse me, or whatever. That's part of the experience of eating out. And for me, it's kind of a waste to order food and spend restaurant prices when I'm just going to be eating in my house. Like I'd rather just eat. I'd rather just cook.
Uh-huh. All right, so we're just going to pause and step aside from the topic really quick to give you a recommendation. Because, Tiffany, I don't know about you, but I am always looking for new podcasts. I just always am. I don't know why. I'm constantly looking. And a lot of the times when I look, I am disappointed. Like, I can't quite find something that captures my attention. And I have found a new podcast that has captured my attention. I even recommended it to my dad yesterday, and you've been listening to it too. And so we thought, why not tell our audience about it? Because it does seem like something that if you like the Bittersweet Life, you're gonna like this show. It's called The Europeans, and I would say that it's very similar in tone to us, in that it is very informed, but it is also very relaxed and friendly. What do you think? I know you've been listening a lot to them recently too. What's your take?
It's definitely a serious podcast in the sense that they talk about serious issues that are going on, political issues and what have you. But they do it in a way that is much more laid back and friendly and more humorous. It's not like listening to a news podcast or a
Mm-hmm.
political podcast at all. It's like sitting down and having a conversation about current events with people who really know what they're talking about, but that are also your friends.
Yes, I agree. But from the European point of view, so since a lot of our listeners are in the US, if you want the perspective of what's being said across the pond over where Tiffany is, it's a great view on that too. There's also a host, one of the hosts' name is Katy, so if that makes it feel familiar. But they do take on really great questions. And I should mention they also, like us, bring on really great guests. It is a really well produced show. But like recent questions, I just wrote down a few of the recent questions I listened to them tackle. Should Canada join the EU was a question. Then they debriefed the very crucial election that was held in Germany in February and explored the very appropriate question, should we freak out or not, based on the election results. And then, of course, one that's been top of mind for all Europeans and all Americans, I think, how to make sense of the seismic shift in Europe's relationship with the US since Trump took power.
I think it's a great way I mean, you could be living abroad in Europe, or you could be, not just interested in European current events, but it's a great way to follow them without having to decode like a foreign language newspaper. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I personally do not want to read an Italian newspaper. I read Italian. I could do it. I don't want to though. I would much rather hear some English people. I believe they're English. I'm not positive on that because they live in France and the Netherlands respectively. So I don't want to, make any assumptions, but they sound English. But it's very easy to listen to.
Yeah, even if you don't understand the issue. Like, I had definitely not been following the recent election in Germany beyond like a headline or two. And I felt like their debrief of the whole thing made me understand what was happening and what was at stake.
Hmm.
All right, well, it's called The Europeans. I just wanted to throw that recommendation out there, and I hope you take it. All right, let's go back to talking about COVID. Another thing I was thinking of that is different, and I actually don't know if this is the same in Italy or not, is that here, and this is different based on where you work, but here, a lot of the companies are still in a hybrid state where now it's very common for people to be in the office, say, 3 days a week. and be working from home the other 2 days. And that is like another change that has stayed on, you know?
And I think it's wonderful. Personally, I think it's wonderful. And it's wonderful, especially for parents, because I have my another neighbor of mine who we carpool together because our kids go to the same school and are really close friends. She's a lawyer. I think she works, I think it's the same like what you're saying. 2 days a week she's at home and 3 days a week she's in the office or vice versa. And she has just told me like what a huge difference that has made in her life. Because her husband also works, is also the same kind of career. And, it used to be like, for example, we just had Carnevale at school, and the parents are allowed, it's like the one day of the year that the parents are allowed to take the kids up into their classroom and like hang out for 15, 20 minutes before the day starts and take pictures and stuff. And it's special because ever since COVID, and I really was not in elementary school before COVID. He started first grade about like, I guess it must have been the end of 2021. He started first grade. But, parents aren't allowed up there. We're not allowed in the classrooms. And it's nice to go into the classroom. It's nice to see, okay, this is where he sits and this is his desk and like take a peek at his stuff and this is the project that's on the wall. And she said, like before I had this flexibility with working, I could never do stuff like this. I could never take him up to school and spend 20 minutes at his school. Or parent teacher conferences. Like, sometimes you can't get any time after 3 p.m.
Right.
So either you're calling your boss and you're being like, listen, can I leave work 2 hours early? Or you're working from home and you just go. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's such a gift. I mean, it's a gift for anyone, I think, but I think that it is such a gift for people who are trying to juggle, kids in a career. It's not easy, especially if you have multiple kids. I hope that that continues. I've heard that they're kind of starting wanting, lots of companies are trying to change that, but I really hope that they don't. Plus, I think it's got to be good for the environment, for traffic, right?
You would think. You would think so. I mean,
Yeah.
another thing you'd mentioned when you suggested that we do this topic was what that interruption, that kind of couple years of dead time, not that it was a dead time, it was a very, strange and stressful time in some ways, but what that has done for the sense of time. And this is something I've been noticing a lot. Like just the other day, I was talking with a friend of mine that I met around 2016 for the first time. And I said, hey, I think we're coming up on about 10 years of knowing each other. And it felt so strange. Like, you're like, really? Has it been 10 years since we met each other? Because it does seem to have, there's like this weird dead zone in the middle,
Hmm.
or like we talked on a bonus episode recently about the writer Tom Robbins and how he and I were friends with each other, and he recently passed away, and I had been talking with his wife about him after he died, and she said, "Well, when was the last time all three of us were in the same room together?" And I said, we were trying to figure it out. And then I said, gosh, could it be as long back as 2017 or 18? And she's like, oh, it couldn't possibly be that long. And then I said, but COVID. And she's like,
Mm.
oh, right.
Hmm.
She goes, and I do think the last time we saw each other was before COVID. So, wow, that means it's been a lot longer than I thought. It's exactly that same thing, that the lost years is how it feels
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think about that particularly in terms of kids, like not kids as young as Aurelio was, because I feel like luckily, his generation, at least his few years, he was young enough that he was just, whatever. He's at home instead of being at preschool. What's the difference? There's not a ton of difference. But for kids my niece and nephew's age who were in middle school,
Mm.
I mean, that on a scholastic level alone is devastating, but also on a social level, like
Mm-hmm.
all of that. And I mean, American schools were closed for a long time, especially in California where they are.
Yeah.
And I think about those kids. I think about like missing the entire seventh grade. How would that have been,
Yeah.
as far as your social life, as sort of the things that you'd missed, the things, I mean, I think about the things I missed and, but when you're older, it's it doesn't have as much weight. When you're younger, you have fewer things that you've experienced. And so every single thing that you experience is so much more important.
Hmm.
And I just think, oh my gosh, if I'd had to miss all of seventh grade, it would have been devastating. And talk about having a hole in your life.
I think it would have been worse if it was your senior year. Because
Oh,
because
terrible.
what
Or
is your
first year in
senior year? It's like
college.
junior year so stressful, and then senior year you're a bit on easy street, and you get this like one last chance to really hang out with your friends before you guys all
Mm,
scatter into the world, and
that's true.
they would have
That's
just
awful.
not gotten to hang. I mean, they would have. I'm sure they found ways. Those of you who were that age, feel free to write in and tell us because I'm sure you found ways to hang out anyway because that is the way that teenagers are. Find a way.
Well,
Figure it out. But
teenagers, it's so the friendships are so important to teenagers. Like I've been sort of learning about this. I'm always kind of dabbling in child psychology, trying to like learn,
yeah,
as much as I can to be as good of a parent as I can be. And I just was listening to something recently, and they were like, 0 to 7 is like mom is the most important person, and then 7 to whatever, it's 7 to 12, dad becomes super important, and it's really important that he's present. And then 12 to 18, it's friends. That's who is the most important people in your child's life in that
mm-hmm.
time, and they need to be around friends. It's
Yeah.
not like optional. It's necessary for their development. So to take that away from them is just,
Yeah. I have to ask though, since Aurelio is 9 years old, your son right now, are you finding that
mhm.
true? Is he tipping toward dad right now?
He does sometimes. Like, okay, I'll tell you, when we play games, like a board game or that kind of game,
Mm-hmm.
he always wants, he and Claudia are always ganging up on me. Like, they always want me to lose.
Uh-huh.
And they don't even really care which of them wins as long as I lose.
Yeah, it's the patriarchy. No, just kidding. Just joking.
Well, it kind of feels like that sometimes.
Uh,
But I tell myself it's because I'm just so good at games.
mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, I kind of am. Not as good as my sister. She's the best. I have to
Mm-hmm.
give credit where credit is due. She is the best. But I learned at her knee how to be super competitive when it comes to gaming. And so I think that they
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not the kind of person who lets my kid win. I just don't believe in that. They need to learn how to lose. Otherwise, they're gonna, otherwise they'll think when they're old enough, they'll be like, oh, my mom was always letting me win. So I do not let him win. He does sometimes win. I am a little careless when we play chess on purpose. I'm just careless.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think things through as much as I would if I were playing against an adult. But that doesn't mean I'm letting him win.
Yeah, no, I hear
Um,
you on that. I get impatient with the game. I'm like, can we move this along? Like, okay, enough
yeah.
thinking. Play, do something. Like, play something.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, especially true with Monopoly, which takes 3,000 years.
Well,
Um,
well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. Are people in Italy still wearing masks around occasionally? Do you see people wearing masks anymore?
it's very rare. You'll see it in the hospital, and you might see it on the metro, but it's not even, I would say, even a quarter of the people. It's like a smattering of people. But I really love the fact that it's become something that is so socially acceptable now, at least over here, that if you are sick and you are going to be around people, you can just put a mask on. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, because I was sick for, like a month, and, occasionally I was out amongst people because I was also trying to have a life and take care of
Yeah.
Claudio at a certain point and et cetera, et cetera. I would just put a mask on. And I know that nobody's going to look at me funny if I have a mask on. But before it would be like, oh my gosh, what does she have? Like, what rare, like contagious disgusting disease does this person have that she feels she has to wear a mask? And I love that that's not a stigma anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
as far as things that have changed, actually, I did think of something else. And I mean, I don't know how to put this because I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's actually a good thing. On the surface, it kind of appears like, oh, nobody wants to work anymore.
Mm.
But I don't think that's what it is. I think it's people are cognizant of how precious their time is, and also that there are other options. There are other ways of working. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to sit in a cubicle all day.
Yeah.
It's not necessary. Why do I need to do that to be able to fulfill the role that I've been hired to do? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that people, or just the hours, I was thinking the other day about like the number of hours that people are expected to work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not working 40 hours a week, you are, a total lazy layabout. And the truth is that the 40-hour work week only came into being after the unions
Mm-hmm.
insisted on it. Up until that point, people worked, I mean, depending on, I
80?
mean, if you're a fact
Yes.
80, yeah, if you're a
60,
factory
80. Yeah.
worker, I don't even think, I think there was a time when it was 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you've talked also about Bali, how much they work there. So somebody at one point said, no, we should work 40 hours a week. And I can guarantee you that there was somebody else, a lot of other people saying, oh, how lazy are you that you want to only work 40 hours a week? That's so lazy.
Mm-hmm.
2 days off a week, how lazy can you be? So when we talk about now, like, I'd like to work a 4 hour week, a 4 day week,
I'd
or
like to
a
work a
3 day week.
4 hour week as well.
Yeah, 4 hour week. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think someone wrote a book about that. Um, 4 day week, 3 day week. Who are we to say that's lazy
Mm-hmm.
when it's all arbitrary anyway? It's all sort of, it was just decided at a
Mm-hmm.
certain point, and no one's ever like really thought to adjust it again. When the truth
Mm-hmm.
is, do we really? I mean, maybe some people don't need to work that much. I know that when I was working in an office, I didn't need to be there all the hours I was there. I got my work done in half the time.
Yeah. And then you're
Um,
just playing games on your phone, passing the time or something like
well,
that.
I was writing a book, but yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much.
There you go. Way to use the time.
So, so I think that it's good that people are like stopping and being like, "Hey, wait a second. Why am I trading my life, to this company for?" And I mean, I don't want to go down that road because that will open a whole new discussion. But, trading my life for a salary that doesn't even allow me to live in a dignified way in so
Yeah.
many cases.
Mm-hmm. I only had a job once that made me work more than 40 hours a week. Um, I mean, some jobs, when you have certain creative jobs, they're more than 40 hours a week just because. So I probably work more than 40 hours a week right now. But the only job I can remember, it's different when it's like a creative pursuit versus a like you must be here in this building for
Of
this amount of
course.
hours and until it hits 7 p.m. You're sitting in your desk, and
Hmm.
I only had one job once that made me work for it was 65 hours a week, which means
Yikes.
that even on your day off you're there for 5 hours because it's 6 days of 10 and then 5 hours on Sunday. I saved a lot of money during that time because when you work that much, there is no life outside of it. By the time you get
Hmm.
home, you eat and you just fall into exhaustion. And so I had stockpiled a bunch of money from that job because I could never go anywhere or do anything. But, I just hated my life. And when I think back on that working period, which let me tell you, Tiffany, only lasted. I only worked for that company for 4 months, maybe five total. But it feels like it was a year's worth of time. Like I feel like I worked there forever, and then
Yeah.
like I can't believe, but really on paper, I start there in September and I'm gone by January 15th, and that's just
Well, I don't know how
because
you made it. I don't know how you made it that long.
uh, well, they
Um,
kept creeping the hours up, so it didn't start there. It just kept
uh,
growing and growing and growing. Yeah. So I am
well,
so forever grateful for those unions for like saving our lives, and for like being like enough already. We got to get this under control because
yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
working. Oof, I mean, maybe we're just I don't know. We're so used to it now. Like you mentioned with Bali, like in Bali there's no weekend for the people who live there and so there is no expectation of having days off. But
Ugh.
ugh, you know.
I think we do get used to things.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that we get unused to them. And, if you put me in an office for 40 hours a week, I don't think I could handle it, quite
Not
frankly. Like,
anymore. Yeah. It's just like
yeah, it would have to be like life and death sort of situation for me to do that. And I would be planning and scheming to try to find some other way to support myself
So there you go. That's
because I
another
can't.
change. That's another change for the pandemic because you
Well,
were doing
yeah.
that prior and then they sent you home and you proved
Well,
that you could get
I
the
was
work done
not
at
40
home.
hours a week. I was not 40 hours a week.
Oh, I
I
thought you
was
were. Hmm.
No, no. I was I think 33. I mean, it was a little less. I worked like 6.5 hours a day, I think.
Okay.
So it was not quite full time, but it wasn't part time. It was more like in between part time and full time. But what you were saying about the time feeling like it was a long time, what I meant when I said the passage of time, I didn't actually think of it in the way that you mentioned it in this sort of open gaping hole in our lives, which is totally also true. But what I was thinking of was rather those 3 months, 3 months of like true lockdown that we
Mm-hmm.
had in Rome. Because of course the COVID period is a couple of years, but that really intense, like you can't go out. You can't go anywhere but the supermarket and the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Schools are closed, everything's closed. You can't even, for us in Italy, you can't even take a walk. Like you
Yeah.
can walk around your block, not even around your block, like you can walk around your building kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's it. That period of time for me feels like it was much longer than it
Mm.
actually was. Like it feels like, and what I compared it to in my mind was the baby period. When you have a child, that first year is like the baby year, and it feels endless when you're living in it. Not in a bad way or a good way, it just feels endless. It just feels like that's your whole life. You have this baby and they take up every moment of your life, and it's baby world and it's diapers and it's no sleep and spitting up and trying to breastfeed, and it's all of this baby stuff. And eventually it passes and you have a toddler and whatever, your child starts to grow, and you look back on that time and you feel like it was such a larger portion of your child's life and of your parenthood experience, the baby period. But it's actually really a short time. It's really only 1 year, maybe a year and a half, depending on when you consider toddlerhood starts. And in fact, some people call it the longest, shortest time because that's really how it feels. And when your friends have babies, especially if you don't see them very often, you see them on Instagram or you see them on Facebook, and you're like, oh my God, you have a toddler. That happened so fast. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
your baby, you just had that baby, and now that baby's walking, and now that baby's talking.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it is fast. It's just that when you are living it, when you're the person living it, it feels so slow. And I felt like that was how the lockdown time was. It was really such a short moment in our lives. And it feels like it has so much more weight than like a 2 to 3 month period should have.
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if you feel at all
I
like
mean, I think it
that.
feels different because obviously what we were doing in the US was different. Your lockdown was harder than ours. Nobody ever told us we couldn't walk further than our own block. Stay away from each other, but you can walk wherever you want. Like we didn't have it as seriously as you, and for us, I think it came and went. Like the period feels longer to me because the weather would be nice and you'd be outside and it would feel like, okay, we're finally being able to live a bit more, and then it would lock down again. So we had kind of multiple waves, so it feels different to me than what you guys went through. But I get what you're saying because it was that first, like, we're all in this together feeling where we're all gonna buckle down and learn how to make sourdough bread and stay home and try to entertain each other by leaving cute messages in our windows and stuff like that. That period feels like it was a long and short time. But I think
Mhm.
for us, it dragged on into, you know, it feels like it dragged longer. Like it just sort of dragged on longer.
Yeah, we had some waves though. I remember like even just looking back at our archives, I was like, oh yeah, then again with Christmas, we had locked that first Christmas
Mm-hmm.
2020, like we weren't supposed to. I think
Yeah.
they finally said, okay, on Christmas Day, you're allowed to go spend Christmas with family, but you couldn't go out. There was nothing open, like there was no New Year's Eve.
Mm-hmm.
So we had waves as well.
Yeah.
And there'd be a huge uptick and they'd lock us down again, but it was never quite as severe as that first time. And I think for me also it was like I was counting the days. I was on social media doing a little like lockdown diary, and like it's day 27
Yeah,
and
yeah.
today we're making, castles out of Play-Doh and I'm teaching Aurelio his letters and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
doing yoga and
Uh,
like trying to fill the day.
it is also interesting that, I mean, it was not an insignificant thing. And
No,
because there's so many, I mean, I'm sure as soon as we stop this episode, which we are about to do, we'll get off of this call and we'll think of countless more things that have changed as a result, that things are not exactly the same anymore. It was a massive rift. Even when you pointed out, like, we should talk about it, it's been 5 years. It has that same thing with the time, like it's elastic, or it's like it's been 5 years. It feels like it's far away, and it also feels like, gosh, it's right there, like it's right next to you still, and that's weird too. It just has that kind of that black hole feeling that it has, like this expanding and contracting feeling where it's like both distant and all over our lives still.
for
Yeah.
sure.
All right. We are going to leave it there. Yeah, check out those Friday episodes because you might not think you want to revisit COVID, but there are so many great stories that are told in the episodes that we're going to air that, yeah, revisit it with us. And I do want to thank, and I do thank you in the beginning of those episodes too, but the community of the Bittersweet Life was extremely helpful to me during that period of time. I'm sure you felt the same. Like, it really did feel like this is a global thing that we're all going through together, and we're all like isolated and alone, and yet somehow, because we were sharing our stories with each other, it felt like not quite as lonely. It felt like there was
Hmm.
we were making a purpose out of it, is what it felt like. We were documenting the moment. We were in it together, and that was cool. And making this show is hard and a ton of work. And there have been many times over the 10 plus years we've been making it where I thought, oh, why are we still doing this? Like, let's, we're working ourselves to death. Let's stop. We've done a great job. Let's be done. And then, like, something like COVID happens. Wow, thank goodness we created this show prior to that because it made that period of time so much better. And
Hmm.
now, talking about that suction of time, it's like, I can't believe we've been making shows for 3 years since then, That also
Hmm.
seems crazy. Hmm.
Yeah. And I know that you also know that we've heard from a lot of listeners that this show really helped them get through the COVID times.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me feel good.
Yeah, same here. Same here for sure. All right, well, let's leave it there. And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katie Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Join us again. Bye. Katie popping in real quick to take you on a little journey for a moment. Back to when Tiffany and I were exploring the streets of Rome. Take a listen.
So Piazza Navona is,
Ah.
yeah, I know you've been here before, Katie, but is there even a word? It's a spectacle. It's spectacular.
It really is.
Oh, and look, Katie, it's noon on the dot right now. As you can hear the bells from Sant'Agnese in Agone. Now, it's kind of hard to know where to look first in this piazza because there's so much going on and there's so many beautiful things. Probably what's going to take your attention the most is the central fountain. This is by Bernini, John Lorenzo Bernini, the famous sculptor and architect. There's actually a great story behind this fountain because the Pope at the time, Pope Innocent X, came on the heels of Pope Urban VIII. And Urban VIII had been not only Bernini's patron and champion, but also a close friend of his. So he had gotten all the amazing projects and commissions all throughout Urban VIII's papacy. And he was just a favorite artist of the whole city. And when Innocent took over, he had been a rival of the previous pope. And so he didn't want to work with anyone that that pope had worked with. And so Bernini suddenly was out of fashion, and he instead was working with a couple of different architects, including Francesco Borromini, who's my personal favorite architect. And he was the great rival of Bernini. So suddenly, finally, Borromini gets to shine. And in fact, the central church that you can see here, this towering, gorgeous Baroque church, is by Francesco Borromini. But Pope Innocent decided he wanted to build a monumental fountain. Now, he sent out, not exactly commissions, but he sent out notices to the great artists of the time to submit their ideas and their designs for the new fountain, and then he was going to select which one he preferred. He, on purpose, did not invite Bernini to submit his ideas. But there was a family member of his who knew what was going on, who loved Bernini's work, so he convinced Bernini to make a model of the fountain anyway. And they put it in a place in the palace where the Pope would not be able to miss it. And so when Pope Innocent saw a model of what Bernini had projected for this fountain, he was completely gobsmacked by it. He fell instantly in love with it. And he was quoted by a contemporary historian as having said, "He who desires not to use Bernini's designs must take care not to see them."
We have had so much fun exploring this historic city. So many wonderful stories, so many beautiful and thrilling sights to see, and we've made so many discoveries together. Now imagine being on the streets of Rome with us, making those discoveries for yourself, as we show you some of Rome's most delightful secrets. You see them with your own eyes. You smell the smells. We're leading a week in Rome this October, 2025, from the 5th to the 11th, a small group of adventurous and curious listeners. And you could be one of them. Find out more information at thebittersweetlife.net or email us for the details at bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. Now, back to the show.
Per poter ricordare ciò che amo.